Hello YouTube students, my name is Vincent and today I want to take a look at imaginary numbers. In particular, I want to take a look at the New York Regents question, which expression is equivalent to I to the 233rd power. Now this seems like a really challenging problem, but as it turns out this is really just a 4th grade long division problem, and you're going to see why in a second. We start with the definition of I. I is defined to be the square root of -1, which allows us to say that I squared is equal to -1. Now, one property of exponents is that anything raised to the 0 power simply equals 1. And anything raised to the first power is just equal to itself. So this allows us to write I to the 0 equals 1, I to the first equals I. And now to look at I to the third power, what we really need to consider is I to the third equals I squared times I to the first. Right? Law of exponents tells us that we just add those exponents together. So when we evaluate this, we have I squared is equal to -1, and I to the first is equal to I. So I to the third is really just equal to -I. Okay. Now I want to take a look at what happens when we go to I to the fourth power. And I want to look at I to the fourth as I squared times I squared, right? Because I to the 2 times I to the 2 is I to the 2 plus 2. But remember, from the chart, we have I squared is equal to -1. So this is really just -1 times -1. And a -1 times a -1 is equal to a +1. But you'll notice that this pattern is starting to repeat. And as it turns out, this pattern repeats every 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. So we need to find a way to see where I to the 233rd, where it falls in this list. And the way we're going to do this is by long division. So we take a look at something like I to the fourth. What does that have in common with I to the 0? Well, when we look at 4 divided by 4, 4 goes into 4 once, 1 times 4 is 4, so when we subtract this, we have a remainder of 0. So as it turns out, whatever the remainder is, it's going to match with these 4 values here. Or more explicitly for this problem, we could evaluate I to the 233rd simply by doing 233 divided by 4. So when we divide, 4 goes into 2, it doesn't, so we have to look at 4 going into 23, it goes in 5 times. We subtract 5 times 4. Right, there's a 3 left over, now we have to bring down the other 3. 4 goes into 33 8 times. 4 times 8 is 32, which tells us that we have a remainder of 1. Remainder 1 is going to match up with I to the first power. So I to the 233rd is actually equal to I to the first, and I to the first is really just equal to I. Which tells us that the answer to this problem is going to be choice 3. It's just simply I. Okay, well that's going to conclude this problem. I hope that this video was helpful, and remember, keep in mind that in math, whenever we get stuck on a problem like this, it's always good to look for a pattern of this sort, because you're not meant to just continue this list that would take the entire test. Okay, so thank you all for watching. Take care.